The House has approved a non-binding resolution condemning QAnon and far-right conspiracy theories that it promotes. But 17 Republicans and even Justin Amash actually voted against the resolution, claiming that it threatens free speech.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said the move is meant to condemn ideologies that, quote, spread dangerous conspiracy theories that fuel division and even directly lead to violence. Journalist Zaid Jilani joins us now to discuss this resolution, whether it was the right approach. Great to see you, Zaid.
Good to see you, Zaid.
Yeah, good to be here.
All right, so for people who haven't followed the QAnon conspiracy very closely, lay out some of sort of the core beliefs that they are all about and whether you think that this was fundamentally the right approach to take from the House.
Yeah, so it's funny that you say there are people who haven't followed it closely, because it's interesting because every time they've surveyed people about this, some people have heard of it, not too many. And I think most of the people who've heard of it really can't define it because it's really bizarre. But it's something where you may end up seeing a meme or an image. So basically what it says is it suggests that the government, there's a deep state kind of conspiracy, which is obviously, a lot of people believe in some kind of government conspiracy or powerful elites. But basically it's like they are kind of shielding high level, like people basically like Jeffrey Epstein, but much broader than that and much more partisan than that. It's basically suggesting that the Democratic Party is shielding, elite pedophiles, like I said, Epstein-type people, and that the only person who knows about this intimately is somebody who goes by this moniker of like Q, and they send out messages and they're seeking the truth of that. It's kind of a reworking of the old, there's an elite cabal that's kind of shielding itself and above the law. It's a kind of a new twist or variation on that. It's particularly bizarre, but it's not necessarily new for people to believe that there is these kind of the things you would see on the X-Files or something about in terms of people in shadowy corners, in black helicopters and so on and so forth.
Sure.
It's kind of adding a new wrinkle to that, I would suppose.
And so, Zaid, then let's talk about this. So the House Speaker, they offered a resolution to condemn it. And I did see, there were some 17 Republicans voted against it. I think the media spun it as like they're standing with QAnon. But I thought that it was an interesting, the take that they were essentially making was, look, I mean, not a lot of people have even heard about this in terms of like violence or whatever. It's not like you've seen like mass violence associated with the QAnon movement. Like, is it appropriate to specifically like seek out different things that you don't like and condemn it? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Congress has a tradition of basically passing kind of non-binding resolution and just kind of stating their opinion about something. As far as I can tell, these kind of resolutions have almost never been meaningful in any way. They're just kind of like, you do it, then you can write an email to your constituents saying, look at what we did, and so on and so forth, or get a couple of headlines out of it. I think the reason why, so Justin Amash is a Libertarian member of Congress. He voted against this resolution, and there's really two parts of the resolution that probably kind of gave him some worries. There's one part, well, actually, there's two paragraphs, I should say. They both deal with the FBI. Basically, they're calling on the FBI to investigate links between like foreign actors and QAnon, and basically to have the intelligence community keep an eye on QAnon. And of course, the intelligence folks will keep an eye on anyone where they suspect they may be involved in illegal activity or violence. I don't think most people who are sharing, boomer memes about QAnon or whatever, or someone showing up with a Q sign, is any kind of threat to national security. It's an absurd belief to have, of course, but there are many absurd beliefs out there.
Yes.
I think something like half of Democrats thought that Russia fixed the 2016 election, like YouGov has shown that they thought they changed ballots. I mean, that's a completely absurd belief as well. And there are many other ones out there. 9/11 truth was a big one during the Bush era. And, I think it is a responsibility for government officials to not endorse these beliefs and to also try and build the kind of trust and transparency with the general public that can undermine conspiracy theories and generally get people involved in civic participation in a healthy, kind of sane way. But I do think Amash had a point here when he was saying that, basically the government or the state shouldn't directly be targeting people, even for absurd speech. The only appropriate time to do that is when violence is involved or illegal activity is involved and so on and so forth.
Yeah. I mean, hasn't there been, I'm just trying to remember, wasn't the Comet Pizza guy, wasn't that a QAnon thing? And I think there was somebody else.
Q adjacent.
Who showed up at a dam with explosives or so. There were a few incidents that were tied to potentially dangerous or criminal behavior related to QAnon. But the thing that I was thinking of is actually, and their whole thing is like Donald Trump is going to expose this pedophile, pedivore ring. And there's going to be a day when everybody's brought to justice. That's kind of like, as I understand it, the core of the belief. belief. But there, as you pointed out, there's this belief that the deep state is arrayed against them. So when you have government officials come out and specifically condemn it, I almost feel like it feeds into their conspiracy more than doing anything to really effectively tamp it down.
Yeah, I mean, it's a conspiracy about the government itself. And if the government itself is kind of acting overly defensive, saying, no, this isn't true, like we're going to pass an entire resolution with hundreds of members of Congress saying it's not true and you're terrible, it's kind of, it could in some way feed the fires of it, because the entire thing is based on provoking that reaction, right? Like, if at the end of the day, Donald Trump comes and goes and nobody exposes the mass pedophile ring, at some point, someone who believes in this is just going to move on. The same way, I don't know, there were polls showing, I don't know, a quarter or a third of Americans were like, thought 9/11 truth was maybe true, but eventually just kind of went away. You kind of have to have some grist for the mill to keep these things going. And I think kind of an open kind of confrontation with these folks kind of gives them a lot of what they want.
Yeah.
Whereas I think actually building kind of trust and having transparency with the general public is generally the best way to deal with conspiracy theories. I mean, when I was a teenager, I feel like I was curious about many conspiracy theories, and the main reason why was because I just didn't trust the government. Like, it didn't seem like it spoke to me. And I think a lot of these people, they just feel like the government's not really speaking to them. But if you're getting overly defensive and kind of going over the top with this stuff, you might feel even more that way. And so generally, yeah, I do think that, like, yeah, when Trump is asked about QAnon, you should say it's absurd, it's nonsense, it's not true, as opposed to what he did say, which is, it was obvious he didn't know what it was, but he thought maybe they liked him, so he kind of said some positive things about it. I don't think that's the way to handle it either. But I do think that, you know, if there's a conspiracy about the deep state and government overreach, you don't want to be doing either of those things. You don't want to be having any government overreaches in response. So
yeah, I think that's right. You know, Zed, it kind of reminded, Crystal and I were talking about this when we were thinking about this segment, which is that you saw all these liberals who were upset when Twitter this weekend started banning, you know, people who wish death upon the president. And it was like, well, you know, you guys asked for this. Like, you want Twitter to go out there and start removing things. It will send you down a path in many cases that you don't necessarily want and can come right back to bite you. I don't think people should be doing that, but I don't know if Twitter should be censoring anything.
I mean, look, this is part of having an open conversation in politics. People are going to say things that you disagree with. People are going to say absurd things, and people are going to lose their cool, right? Maybe at the extremes, if someone says a death threat or something, you know, that would actually be illegal to send like a death threat to a politician. Yeah, at that point, probably social media companies have an obligation to do something just to abide by the law. But otherwise, like, that's the business of democracy. Like, yeah, some people are going to be angry and like say something stupid about Trump right now just because everyone's on edge because it's the election or polarization and so on and so forth. Banning people for that outright seems a little bit extreme. You know, maybe send them a flag or something, like, you know. But I think that, yeah, that is the road that you walk down on if you decide that you, instead of coming to political conclusions through conversations, which often can be very frustrating, obviously, but you just come through them by having an authority, just tell people what to believe. I mean, that is where you end up. So
yeah,
I think that's well said. Zed, great to see you.
Good to see you, man. Still to come, a new study seeks to pinpoint inequality across class and age and race. President of the People's Policy Project, Matt Bruenig, he's going to talk about that when Rising returns.